Hi, I'm Killoran and brother of.
Taylor.
Oh, shoot. Sister of. Hi,
Brothers in Christ, sister by blood.
I'm Killoran and
And I'm Taylor Berglund.
yeah, his sister. We're here to talk about why it's not in the Bible.
So this is basically, your normal YouTube vlog series where two siblings read through all the apocryphal books of the Bible. Like every other channel does.
The huge.
And neither of us are like experts in this thing. There's no real qualification other than just like this shared interest / me going to Killoran and being like, hey, you want to do a video series with me? Because it'll be fun.
Today's book is the Gospel of the Infancy of Thomas.
Yep.
And as my husband brought up, it's not about the infancy of Thomas. It's about Jesus's childhood.
No, it's basically, it like at its core is like Bible fan fiction, basically, of like, did you ever wonder what happened to Jesus after he escaped being killed by Herod, but before he like wowed all the people at the temple? Because if you did, you're in luck, because that's all this book is about.
So today when we talk about this book and we say Jesus did this or Jesus said this, obviously we're referring to a book that pretty much, we'll get to this later, but has already been proven as heretical.
You guys haven't read it, so let's first explain what this book is. Like, what's the deal with this book? So it is just like, it's a story where Jesus just like goes around doing supernatural things as a little kid and generally being impossible to parent. Is that fair?
Yeah. Basically.
It works in like this weird like pattern where it'll be 3 miracles. Then someone attempts to teach Jesus a lesson, usually the alphabet. Jesus does not want to learn the alphabet throughout. It's a weird recurring trend here.
I thought I was wrong. I kept rereading because my reading comprehension is pretty poor. So I kept reading it and I was like, is he literally getting tripped up on the alphabet?
We'll get there. And then after that little story where Jesus doesn't learn anything, but other people learn things from Jesus, then it goes to another 3 little miracles. And then the pattern repeats itself. And it does this a couple times, and then they literally just copy the story from Luke chapter 2, where Jesus is at the temple with the elders, and like they just pin it at the end, like, and see, this is where the story picks up. And and then it's like done. That's the whole book. And it's like 15, 16 chapters, and all of them are like 3 to 4 verses long. It's very quick.
It's an easy read, but it's a weird read.
Yeah, so let's talk about why it's weird here.
Basically, these really little storybook, fairy tale style stories of Jesus that's like him kind of doing the same thing over and over. And I don't know if
and
you
that
want to go
thing
right
over and over again is murdering everyone else in the village.
Yeah, I didn't want to like spoil it for everyone, but like basically Jesus had like somebody bump into him. And he, like, struck him dead.
A little murder Jesus running around.
Jesus wouldn't do that. And, like, I mean, like, it wasn't just one time. Because as I was reading, so Taylor gave this to me as, like, okay, you're just going to read through the book.
I did not tell her any preface of what this was going to be. I was like, just be ready for the video. We're going to do Infancy Gospel of Thomas. It'll be our first one. It's real short. Shouldn't be anything too bad.
And, like, dude's a criminal. He's just like striking people dead every paragraph. And then I was like, okay, well, I have to mention what strikes me most about different passages. But if you keep killing people off, Jesus, what stands out to me the most is that you're a jerk. Like, why are you striking everybody down? Like, dude literally just bumped into you and you're like cursed. And then he just like drops dead.
So this is a good transition into the second major section of most videos, which is,
bring me back,
why
Taylor.
is this
Bring
book
me back.
not in the Bible? And the answer is because Jesus sins in this book, which is not like, I mean, like, they don't frame it as a sin, but like killing someone for bumping into you is definitely a sin according to like anything in the Mosaic law. Like, Jesus just doesn't get to say like, well, it's not wrong for me to kill someone because I'm the Son of God, which is kind of how the book treats it. Chapter 3 verses 1 through 3, Jesus is like playing in like the pond or something like that, and he makes these doves out of clay.
That was a cool part.
And then he makes them fly, and everyone's like, oh, that's cool. We'll get to that, because that story has actually lasted a lot longer than the rest of the book has, which is interesting. But then, shortly thereafter, some other kid comes along and, like, messes up the place where little Jesus is playing.
Come on, little Jesus.
And little Jesus pulls off his first murder, canonically, at that point.
Recorded murder. Maybe he had killed other people.
And Jesus says, just like the tree withers up, so you will wither up. And it says the kid withers up, which is a horrifying way to describe someone dying.
I literally thought I had read it wrong, read it back, and was like, oh, nope. One of the doves withered? Oh, nope. And then I'm like,
killed the kid.
That's a human being. He just withered up a human being.
Yep. And
Come
then
on, little Jesus.
The point that I love about the story, though, is that it includes that the boy's parents go to complain to Mary and Joseph about what Jesus has done. Which
and honestly, we all would.
That's the most believable part of this whole book. And then Joseph goes to talk to Jesus about this and be like, hey, I get it, but can you stop with the killing your peers? And Jesus more or less responds with like I'm annoyed you're coming to me with this, but I know it's not you who brought this up. I know it's someone else who told you to tell me this, and it's okay. Bam, they're blind now.
like, no words.
Like Jesus in the New Testament totally would have done.
He just didn't have any sort of patience that we see real Jesus having.
Right.
Any compassion. He was just like, zap, zap, zap.
And then Jesus starts doing like miracles and being like, I'm going to bring this person back to life. I'm going to heal the people that I just made blind. Like, all better now. He does not raise any of the kids he killed back to life. That's an important note here. Chapter 14, verse 2, Jesus is being a bit of a smart aleck to his teacher in one of those teaching stories we talked about.
Surprise.
And so the teacher hits him on the head, which is obviously don't do that to kids. And then Jesus responds by killing him. And so
of course.
Someone will be like, Jesus, say alpha. That's the first letter. And Jesus will say, first tell me what is beta, and I can tell you what alpha is.
Which is probably the only believable part of this whole gospel. Jesus is always throwing back questions.
Jesus responds that to like this very wise teacher, and the teacher is like so distraught that he's like, oh my gosh, I've been ruined by a small child. What does this mean about my teaching career? Like it's intense throughout.
The part that got me, and you can maybe remind me where it was, but near the end of the gospel, there's a part, I think maybe that part when Mary and Joseph, I think Joseph comes up and he's like, has my child done anything? Like, he's like scarred. He's just scarred. His poor son keeps killing people, and Joseph's always getting called like, your son's been brought to the principal's office again for killing somebody. Mm-hmm. And he's just assuming, like, what did he do to you, teacher? What did he do to you? And he's like, actually, your son is very wise and has a lot of grace. And Joseph's like, oh, okay.
Okay.
Cool. Didn't mess up this time.
This one way better than
Tally won.
It adds a whole new level of horror to, like, the Luke 2 events of, like, we lost Jesus for 2.5 days. What could possibly have happened?
I, too, would be scared if this was true. If this childhood was true, I, too, would be afraid. Like,
we gotta get Timmy back there ASAP. Not so much for him, for everyone else's sake. Overall, the murder count is Jesus murders 3 people, brings 2 people back to life. Still, even if that cancels out, it's still net 1 murder, which is too many for Jesus. So it's pretty clear why this is not in the Bible. This feels more like Greek mythology with just like Bible characters than it does like actual New Testament. So then, last question here. Did people take this seriously at the time? Like, obviously someone was trying to pass this off as like, hey, this should go in the Bible. And in the way that like a lot of the New Testament stuff was like letters being passed around from different churches. And so there was no organized Bible yet. And so before there was a Bible, did people get this letter and go, good points? Or did they get it and go, no, what is this? And by and large, it seems like they went, no. For obvious reasons. And It's one of the Gnostic works, which was a major heresy going on at the time. You see Paul respond to it in a lot of his letters that's going on. And Gnosticism would be way too much for us to get into here, but you can look that up pretty easily. And it was written, obviously, much later than the rest of the New Testament, so there's not like the credibility attached to it. It's worth noting that Thomas that is being referenced here is not the Apostle Thomas. That's not where this comes from. It's Thomas the Israelite, which again sounds like it could be the Thomas. It's not, again, because this was written way after Thomas died.
I honestly feel like Thomas the Train could have written a better gospel.
Thomas the Train.
Like, this guy obviously had a problem with fighting, or he saw God as a very violent being, which neither one is true. I feel like Thomas the Israelite, didn't know him personally, but just kind of missed the mark.
The Christian leaders absolutely did not buy it. Hippolytus, who is like this like early Christian leader, he was alive at the time that this was written and started making the rounds, wrote a book called The Refutation of All Heresies, which is, by the way, a very ambitious title, All Heresies Refuted. And he called it, I want to make sure I get this right, so I have my notes here. He called it a fake and heresy. Another guy, Eusebius, called it fiction. He just didn't even mince words. He's like, this is just made up. But it did catch on in some circles, which is like, and not where you would expect. A story from the Infancy Gospel of Thomas is actually in the Quran, and it's the story of Jesus making the little doves. That shows up in Surah 5, verse 110 of the Quran. And it's possible that they got this from another place, because this story shows up in two different places, kind of like when you've got like the normal Gospels and like the stories in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The Gnostic Gospels do the same thing, where sometimes they like share stories with each other. That does not make them any more right, but
I kind of believe the dove story though, because that was the only one, and it started strong because that was at the beginning of the book where I was like, oh, I'm gonna have a hard time believing this book is fake, and then I read the rest of the book. I believe it's fake.
Killing people. So that is why the Infancy Gospel of Thomas is not in the Bible. So thanks, Killoran, for reading through this with me, going through this. If you guys have questions, let us know in the comments. Again, we're not experts, so we probably won't actually be able to answer, but we'll give it a shot, you know?
We're just suggesting some things. Anyway, thanks, guys, so much. Thanks, Taylor, for having me. I look forward to the next one. Yeah, hopefully it is equally as crazy.
Yeah, tune in next week, and we'll have the next video up where we go through another crazy apocryphal book. Bye.